There are nights that look just like any other night. The streetlights are still that dim yellow, the night wind is still cold, the city is still breathing steadily in silence. But just one wrong step is enough to change the fate of a human being. And there are cases that don't just take one life. They create waves big enough to rewrite the laws of an entire nation. This is the story of Viraikuam. Katie Sepich, a 22-year-old woman walking alone into the night in Las Cruces, New Mexico. And by the next morning, the New Mexico desert stood silent after the last warmth of her body had disappeared. Yet that very night would later open the door to something called Katie's Law, and save thousands of people her family will never know by name. Before she became a name in the news and testimony in courtrooms, Katie was simply the light in every room she walked into. She grew up in Carlsbad, a town of sand, wind, and blazing red sunsets. Her childhood was full of laughter, homemade stage shows, loud tantrums that faded as quickly as they came. Friends called her the Fireball. Her family called her Hurricane Katie. And her father, Dave, just shook his head and said, "She never went slow. She lived at 90 miles an hour, always." Even as a kid, Katie loved being at the center. She'd organize performances in the living room, line the whole family up on the couch like a proper audience, then sing, dance, act, and tell stories all by herself. Her little brother AJ remembers once asking to be her backup singer, but Katie insisted she had to be the star. Yet whenever someone messed with him at school, she was the first one to step in and fight for him. As she grew older, Katie wasn't just loud. She was smart. She studied business, joined a sorority, juggled classes with a part-time job. People around her described her as the kind of girl you notice the moment she walks through the door. Pretty, with a big smile, a bright voice, and an energy like summertime. She was getting ready to start an MBA program, one more step toward a promising career. She had a boyfriend, Joe. A relationship 8 months deep, full of youthful intensity and early adulthood uncertainty. They had talked about the future, about a home together, about children. But like so many couples in their 20s, life began pulling them in different directions. Katie was preparing for grad school. Joe was about to move to another city to work in his family's business. Distance, plans, ambitions, everything started to fall out of rhythm. And then came Labor Day weekend, 2003. The night that, years later, every time someone mentions it, her family has to stop for a moment, just to breathe. Las Cruces was glowing that night. Music spilled out of bars and onto the streets. Neon signs cast colors onto flushed young faces. Like many other students, Katie, Joe, her roommate Tracy, and a group of friends went bar hopping, drinking here, dancing there, laughing, shouting, squeezing every drop of fun out of the holiday. At one of the bars, surveillance cameras caught Katie and Joe still holding hands. She was leaning into him, her head tilted, her face relaxed and smiling. If the night had ended there, this would have been nothing more than a typical college evening. A bit of alcohol, a bit of drama, then making up the next day. But it didn't end there. Near the end of the night, the group headed to a house party a few blocks from where Katie lived. Around 30 or 40 people were squeezed into the living room, kitchen, and hallway. Music pounded against the brick walls, rattling the window frames. Beer, laughter, cigarette smoke, cheap perfume. They all mixed into a single hazy blur. And right there in the middle of the crowd, Katie saw Joe kissing another girl. It was like someone had yanked the plug out of her. The music was still blasting, but everything around her suddenly felt distant, distorted. She rushed over, pulled Joe away. They argued in the middle of the living room, voices raised at first, then dropping lower, turning into choked words. No one remembers exactly what they said to each other in those last seconds. Only this, at around 3 a.m., while the party was still going, Katie walked out of the house, alone, cold, with no phone, no purse, no keys. Her car was still parked out front. Her belongings were still inside the house. It was just her and the darkness stepping through that door. From that house to her place, It was only a few blocks, a short walk she'd done countless times. But that night, those few blocks became the last stretch of her life. The next morning, the sun rose like it always does. Tracy woke up groggy after a late night, expecting to hear the usual sounds from Katie. Bathroom door opening, dishes clinking in the sink, her humming some random tune. But the place was quiet. Tracy called Katie. No answer. She started texting friends, asking if anyone had seen her after the party. Not far away, Katie's mother, Joanne, woke up with a strange feeling. She later said there was no obvious sign, no phone call in the middle of the night, no loud noise, just a heaviness in her chest, like an invisible hand pressing and pressing, refusing to let go. Then the phone rang. On the other end, someone asked, "Have you talked to Katie today?" Joanne froze. Every instinct a mother has screamed at once. Something is wrong. Something is very, very wrong. Around 11 a.m. that same morning, east of Las Cruces, a couple out hunting were driving past an old dump site in the desert. They didn't expect their eyes to land on what the whole city was about to confront. Out on the dry earth, among low shrubs and scattered trash, they saw a human body lying still. When officers arrived, they found a young woman, badly burned across the back and shoulders. Her clothes were ripped, dragged out of place. Her legs had been positioned in a disturbing, deliberate way, as if the killer wanted to leave some twisted signature. Nearby, tire tracks from what looked like a truck or large vehicle marked the ground. There were no obvious signs of a struggle right there, which meant she had been attacked somewhere else, then dumped in this place. At that moment, no one knew who she was. No name, no ID, no phone. Meanwhile, at Katie's house, investigators stepped into the backyard and found another chilling scene. One of her sandals lying in the dirt, the window screen torn and pushed aside, the gravel below scraped and disturbed, like someone had been dragged. It all pointed to one thing. Katie had made it home, but she hadn't gone inside the normal way. When detectives asked Tracy to come identify someone possibly connected to Katie's disappearance, she still tried to think positively. In her mind, Katie was sitting in a hospital bed somewhere, maybe without ID, waiting for a friend to vouch for her. That's the picture she carried, right up until the moment they unzipped the body bag. When the cloth was pulled back and Tracy saw the face inside, her world fell apart. The friend who laughed loudly, who joked, who complained about late-night hunger, who planned their classes and weekend trips, was gone. Her skin was gray, her features distorted, the marks of a brutal fight etched into her. Tracy later said, "Looking at Katie's face, I knew she died in pain. That wasn't the face of someone who went peacefully." The autopsy revealed the full horror. Katie had been raped and strangled. The killer had poured some kind of liquid over her back and shoulders and tried to burn the body, but the fire had gone out partway through. Under her fingernails, technicians found blood, proof she had fought desperately to the end. That blood, when run through the system, yielded nothing. The DNA didn't match any offender currently in the database. A savage crime, a young victim, an anonymous killer. And in the eyes of detectives, there was one obvious name to start with. Joe. Joe was the boyfriend, the last one to argue with Katie, the one caught kissing another woman in front of her. During his first interview, he didn't immediately mention the fight. He minimized things, dodged, then finally admitted to it. Among nearly 40 people at the party, he alone refused to provide a voluntary DNA sample. Everyone else lined up and swabbed their cheeks. He said no. It didn't stop there. Within days of Katie's death, Joe left Las Cruces, returning to his family hundreds of miles away. His parents hired a lawyer. The lawyer advised him to keep his mouth shut. When Katie's family organized her funeral, so crowded they had to set up speakers outside the church. Joe didn't show up. He'd heard there were people blaming him and decided to stay away. Whatever he felt, if he felt anything at all, was buried under layers of self-protection and silence. From the detective's point of view, all of this formed a picture that was hard to ignore. Cheating, arguing, girlfriend dead, fleeing town, refusing DNA, skipping the funeral. To them, Joe was suspect number one. They poured most of their time and resources into him, trying to find holes, contradictions, anything that tied him directly to the murder. But the truth was somewhere else. When investigators secretly collected DNA from Joe using items in Katie's bedroom, where the two had been intimate, and compared it to the DNA under her nails, the result was clear. Match. The man she clawed at in her final moments, the man whose blood stained under her nails, was not Joe. All suspicion was officially lifted. Joe was cleared. He later agreed to a direct DNA swab as well, just to put things beyond doubt. He said he had been afraid at first, afraid the police would misinterpret the presence of his DNA because of their sexual relationship and pin the crime on him. But for the family and the detectives, the biggest damage had already been done. They had lost crucial time in the first months of the investigation, chasing a man whose only crime, ugly as it was, had been betrayal, not murder. While they focused on Joe, the real killer could have been walking right past them on the street, standing in a grocery store line, pumping gas, completely unnoticed. As the case began to cool, another lead surfaced, this time from far away. Wisconsin, over 1,000 miles from New Mexico. 11 days before Katie's murder in Green Bay, a young woman had been kidnapped by two men, taken to a farm, raped, strangled, doused in liquid, and set on fire. The pattern was chillingly familiar. The crucial difference: she survived. Based on her description, police produced composite sketches of the assailants. A farm manager recognized them as two of his workers, Gregorio Morales and Juan Nito. Both were arrested, tried, and given long prison sentences. When detectives in New Mexico heard about the Green Bay case, they understandably considered the possibility of roving predators moving between states, repeating the same attack. But when the men's DNA was compared with the sample from Katie's body, the system once again answered, no, they were monsters, but not the monster who had killed Katie. The Las Cruces case slid back toward a dead end. Time moved on. The raw grief in Katie's home slowly hardened into a quieter, heavier presence. Pictures on the wall, a chair that stayed empty, a voice that no longer echoed down the hallway. Las Cruces, as small cities do, kept living. New students arrived and old ones graduated. More young people went out on holiday weekends, bar hopping just like Katie once did. And somewhere, a question hovered like a ghost. Who killed Katie, and where is he now? 9 weeks after that terrible night, in the same city, two NMSU students, Anella and Leslie, were in their apartment when they heard something. Someone was trying to break in. They heard prying at the door, footsteps inside. Terrified, they scrambled into the bathroom, locked the door, and called 911 with shaking hands. On the line, the dispatcher tried to sound calm. Stay with me. Breathe. Tell me where he is. What do you hear? On the other end came sobs, whispers, the sound of hearts pounding so fast it almost seemed you could hear it through the phone. Police rushed over. They found a young man, 23 years old, inside the apartment, armed with a knife. He was arrested on the spot. His name was Gabriel Avila. That should have been the end of his freedom. Instead, a court decision bought him more time out in the world. The judge granted him bail so he could settle personal matters before prison. Predictably, Avila vanished. He fled to Mexico and disappeared from Las Cruces for a few years. In 2005, when he tried to return to the United States, he was caught. And this time, the system forced him to give a DNA sample, something that had not happened years earlier when he broke into the women's apartment, or back when Katie was murdered. Avila's DNA, quiet and clinical, was uploaded into CAUDIS, the National DNA Database. Just another string of letters and numbers. But then, in a crime lab somewhere, a computer screen flashed an alert. His profile was a 100% match with the DNA under Katie Sepich's nails. In a small lab room, a technician stared at the result, blinked, and reached for the phone. Somewhere else, in a modest family home, Katie's parents picked up a different call. This time, the 6 words carried a completely different meaning. We think we've found her killer. As detectives dug into Avila's past, they spoke with his ex-wife. She recalled finding a woman's ring in his truck while cleaning it one day, a ring she didn't recognize. She handed it over to police. Katie's family looked at it and knew instantly it was hers. Investigators then traced the truck Avila had driven back in 2003 to its new owner. Though the tires had been replaced, they managed to track down the original set. The old tire treads, worn and dirty, lined up perfectly with the tire marks left near Katie's dumped body in the desert. The noose tightened. Avila was cornered. Before a full trial could unfold, he chose to plead guilty. In his statement, he described that night, not with emotion, but with a sort of detached self-justification. He said he had left a drug dealer's house, high and intoxicated, and nearly hit a woman walking along the road. That woman was Katie. He stopped, asked if she wanted a ride. She refused. She was only a few blocks from home, she said. He drove off, but then, in a moment of depravity, he turned the truck around and went back. This time, he saw Katie at her house, trying to climb through a window because she had no keys, no purse, no phone. He approached her. What happened next, the prosecution and family have chosen not to recount in graphic detail. We know enough. From that moment on, Katie never had a chance. He attacked her, raped her, strangled her, then hauled her body into his truck, drove into the desert, doused her in accelerant, and set her on fire, thinking that flames would erase everything. One of the lead investigators later said, if Katie had left that party 30 seconds earlier, or 30 seconds later, he might never have seen her. Sometimes in the fabric of ordinary life, the line between safety and catastrophe is paper thin. On December 26th, the day that should have been Katie's 26th birthday, formal charges were filed against Gabriel Avila: first-degree murder, rape, kidnapping, and evidence tampering. In 2007, he pled guilty. The court sentenced him to 69 years in prison. In theory, he can apply for parole in 2043 after serving at least 30 years. With the brutality of his crimes, his odds of walking free again are nearly zero. Justice had finally arrived, late but real. Yet for Katie's family, a bigger question remained. This didn't have to happen this way, so what can we do to make sure it doesn't happen to someone else? Looking back across the timeline, Katie's mother began to see the fatal gap. Gabriel Avila had been arrested for breaking into the two students' apartment just months after he killed Katie. If at that time he had been forced to submit DNA, his profile would have been in the system. When the DNA from Katie's case was analyzed, the match would have popped up right away. He would have been arrested in 2003, not years later. But back then, New Mexico, like most states, only collected DNA from people who had already been convicted of a felony, not from those who were merely arrested. That meant countless dangerous offenders brushed against the legal system, got processed, and then slipped right back out without leaving a trace of their biological fingerprint. Joanne refused to accept that her daughter's death would only ever be a statistic. She started researching. She read about other cases in other states, about men like Chester Dwayne Turner in California, arrested again and again, but only had his DNA taken on the 21st time. Only then did the system link him to a string of rapes and murders stretching back years. Her grief transformed into something else, a fierce resolve. I wasn't interested anymore in solving just Katie's murder, she said. We already had that answer. I wanted to change the law, so other children wouldn't end up lying in the desert like she did. Together with her husband and family, Joanne met lawmakers, law enforcement, governors, anyone who would listen. They told Katie's story over and over. They pointed to the hole in the system, to the lives that could be saved. What started as small conversations slowly worked its way up through public hearings and legislative debates. In 2006, Katie's law was officially passed in New Mexico. It required DNA samples to be taken from people arrested for certain serious crimes before conviction and uploaded into the system so they could be checked against unsolved cases. By 2011, it was expanded to include most felonies. Over time, more than 30 states adopted similar laws. Just as Joanne had hoped, a new wave followed. Hundreds, then thousands of cold cases were cracked open thanks to DNA collected early. Men who thought they had outrun justice decades ago suddenly found officers at their door on an ordinary morning. Victims who had been names on old files became human again. Families who had lived in limbo finally got answers. No one can say precisely which lives have been saved by Katie's law. There's no list, no tally, but her family believes, with absolute certainty, they're out there, they're alive, and they don't know that in some small way, it's because of Katie. Her brother AJ talks about his sister with a bittersweet smile. She was my protector from the time I was little. At school, if anyone messed with me, she was right there. And even after she's gone, she's still protecting other people. Her younger sister Caroline was just 9 when Katie died. She recalls, "After she was gone, my memories from that time are very clear, but everything feels like the color was drained out. It was like the biggest light in our house had been turned off." As for Joanne, after 2 decades of carrying her daughter's story from hallways to hearing rooms, she has chosen a new way of living. I don't use the word if anymore. If she hadn't gone out that night, if he'd been arrested sooner, if the law had been different, all those ifs just drown you in pain. Instead, I ask, with what has happened, what can we do now to save someone else? For her, the answer is clear. Katie's Law. A law named after a daughter who is no longer alive, yet still present in every case solved thanks to early DNA collection, in every innocent suspect cleared, in every family that finally learns the truth. Katie Sepich only lived 22 years, but the impact she left far exceeds that number. A young woman walks home after an argument, a short stretch of road in the dark, one moment of crossing paths with the wrong man, a body abandoned in the desert. It could have just become another cold file in a dusty cabinet. But from the grief of a single ordinary family in New Mexico, a small light rose up, traveled into legislative halls, into the language of statutes, into crime labs and test tubes, and eventually circled back, standing guard over people who hadn't even been born when Katie died. The darkness took Katie's light, but it could not extinguish the light she left behind.